welcome to the SMC podcast, Dave. Great to finally get you on.
Good, mate.
Well, thank you for having me.
Looking well. Normally sort of start these, give a bit of an introduction of, you're obviously a long time friend of myself and Dunks. We've all been on a honeymoon together. So we're not just inviting our mates to come on, I suppose we are actually, just to come and tell a story. But obviously there's various things we could chat about with yourself. But obviously you taught in our SMC course for a long time. Then you got too expensive to come back. Yeah. Done a lot of things for us. I've been a sort of trusted confidant over the years through advice and various other things. Like the first guest on the podcast, Sharif, I believe you were a motorman in the forces, which is, I can't imagine, is a trade known for its critical thinking or rational thinking. But quite interesting where you end up going, and you and Sharif both end up going. I know you obviously career in the military, then kind of did the sort of trinity of Iraq in maybe the early cowboy days, if you want to call it that, commercially, then Afghan, then into Maritime, and then into business, and then into kind of where you are now. So it's quite a few things just to your story. Be great to explore it, and if you can just start from the very day you were born, give us and go from there. We've got a few hours.
Well, thanks for that lovely, warm introduction there, Pete, Dunks. Your words, not mine, but I'll take them anyway, thank you. Start from when I was born.
I was joking.
Well, it was a challenging day for one person in my family, I tell you, that's for sure. But I think, you mentioned the armed forces, the Marines, and not many people know I was a butcher before I joined the...
Butcher?
Yeah.
That makes sense now, mate.
It does, probably. But I learned some good skills there. Not the typical skills. I didn't butcher anybody, but certainly when you join Royal Marine Training and you do survival X, it comes in handy. Although probably because we hadn't eaten for about 4 days, we weren't chasing down any lambs, but certainly helped me pluck a few chickens.
Did you join as a young man, mate? Because obviously we probably crossed over paths at some point. We didn't serve together. But we met
that's
after.
right.
But you joined relatively young?
Yeah, so I joined at 17. I wanted to join earlier, to be honest, but my mother wouldn't. It's not she wouldn't sign. I think she would have had a pressed her, because before I was under 18, I needed parental signature to sign. But she said, get another job, give it a year, and then see how you feel after it. So I did, and it didn't make it any easier for her, unfortunately, but yeah, off I went.
Lost to the
17,
butchering game.
Yeah. And passed training and went straight into the wild Royal Marine world at the age of 18.
Good time in the Marines?
Probably the best job I've ever had, I think, so far. Yeah. Still searching for the best again. Yeah. And who knows, I might be in it right now. But I left after doing 9 years, and it was a decision of the head, not the heart. I was 27. I probably spat my dummy out a little bit. I'd been given a post to CTC as an instructor, and I didn't want to do that. So I kind of just spat my dummy out a little bit and left. But it was probably a little bit of emotional attached to it, but mostly a decision of the head. I wanted to set myself up in a career that would see me through to retirement.
Yes, you did your leadership stuff. You did junior command course, and
yeah,
as a motorman,
as a highly professional, highly skilled motorman, Peter. Yes, I did. Yes, I was quite lucky to get on that junior command course. It's quite competitive to get on it. I'd been a little bit of a rebel, so with a fair wind.
When you're known as the Bickley burglar, I'm not sure if I got this right, but
Bickley burglar,
known for your climbing ability.
Yeah, so I was passionate about climbing as a young kid. I think that's what kept me out of trouble. Certainly me and my cousin, we took up climbing when I was about 13. Whilst most of the people we went to school in Deckham and Gateshead were getting into girls and drugs and stuff, we found climbing, which was probably our saving grace. So when I joined the Marines, it was kind of still had that passion about me. Yeah.
Never fancy going ML with all the climbing?
I did, because I had a passion for climbing, but I quickly found out climbing as an ML it's exciting, but it's not enjoyable. You know, they put a big pack on your back. It's got to be raining, and that's not climbing. That's brutal. So yeah, I quickly lost the plan of going in that direction quite early on. But the Bickley burglar, it's a name an old friend gave me, because I had a passion for climbing things in military establishments or climbing over fences, trying to break into them. So I was given that unfortunate nickname. Not many people know that, though.
It's not more for your climbing ability over facilities, not actually stealing. But
yeah, I wasn't actually stealing anything. I had this. It started through necessity. I remember getting back late from a night out, and we had to be back at 10 o'clock, and I was strolling in at 1, and they were waiting at the guard gate for me, and I didn't want to go in and get caught, so I decided to scale the fence. And as I scaled the fence, all I heard was, "Army, stop or I'll shoot." And I looked round. I remember looking round and seeing these 2 army soldiers fully kitted out, and I thought, "You're never going to catch me." So I shot off and made it into Halifax block, it was called. Made it into the block, quickly stripped off, jumped in my bed and pretended I was asleep. And I could hear them rummaging around the rooms looking for people, but got away with it. It became a bit of a passion, a bit of an obsession, to be fair, after that. And it culminated in one of the last, I won't call it penetration testing, because I was certainly not applying any science to this, but we just travelled back from Norway on a British Navy vessel, and it had a problem with the engine, and it pulled in at Southampton. And my best friend has actually told this same story at his wedding, because he was part of the 10-man team. We got led ashore, and we were told again, be back by midnight, which I think we all had the intention of doing. Got to midnight after a couple of beers. Come on, let's be late. You know, we want to stay on a little bit longer. So we strolled in at about 3 a.m, and everybody was waiting on the gangplank for us, ready to come in. So we snuck around the side, and I decided to re-engage those old climbing skills again. And the vessel was probably about 6 meters from the jetty, but there was an old jetty post in the middle. So I kind of took a running jump onto that, jumped onto the side of the vessel, got one of the pilot's ladders, pushed it across to the team. They made a bridge, and they all come stumbling across with their Chinese and their pizzas onto the ship, and went back across and tied it. And before you know it, we were in bed. Next morning, the exercise was challenging. The next morning, they knew what we'd done. We knew they knew, but they couldn't prove it. And yeah.
Mate, did you manage to get onto anywhere that was highlighted a few vulnerabilities?
Yeah, and I suppose that's probably where my passion for understanding how things are vulnerable, and how, certainly my role now, looking at assets and various critical assets and looking for the vulnerabilities in them. It started off quite early for me.
Not intentionally.
No, certainly not. No, it was.
You still climbing now? Still climb?
The walls sometimes, yeah. But no. Unfortunately, I've got carpal tunnel.
Can't be showing your hands before. Al.
Yeah, so the tendons aren't great. It's a hereditary. It's not through climbing. My granddad had it, so it's one of the many things he passed on to me. Words of advice.
So what year did you leave the Corps?
So I left in 2004, 5, I think it was. God, I should remember that, shouldn't I? I think it was 2004. Yeah,
and then you obviously saw the everyone, all the lads driving around in Porsches, working out in Iraq, and thought, I fancy a bit of that.
Well, there wasn't many at that time. It was really just about getting started, doing private contract work in Iraq. And my time in the Marines was 9 years. I spent 9 years in the Marines, and half of it was great. It was skiing in Norway or med trips in the likes of. But then September the 11th happened, and that all changed. And yeah, there was a lot of time in the desert, but it wasn't the wrong kind of desert that I was used to. I was used to sandy beaches and Mediterranean trips, and this was very much about, being in Iraq and in Afghanistan. So after the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, and they started to stabilize those areas a little bit, the reconstruction program started, which was driven by the US, a gentleman called General McCoy, and he set up a reconstruction program to basically build hospitals, schools, national infrastructure back into Iraq, which had been destroyed and damaged during the invasion and during the subsequent insurgency. So I took a job with a company called Aegis. Spent a couple of years out there doing private security, looking after those reconstruction workers, those engineers who were helping to build that area. And it was an interesting couple of years.
That was during quite a punchy time out there. There was a fair bit going on. It
was pretty much in the peak of the major problems out there.
What does that, for people watching this, don't know what that is, like mercenary type. What does that look like, on the ground, money wise, kind of?
So what does that life look like? Called it that: mercenaries, private military, private contractors. But essentially, I looked at it as a security task. We had unarmed people, civilians who were engineers, and they were building schools, or they were drawing up plans to rebuild schools, hospitals, but they needed to get from A to B, and it was a dangerous place. So we would plan their routes, escort their routes, and if anything happened whilst we were out of the military camps on those kind of missions, if you like, we would provide support to them.
What do teams look like then? For those that don't, obviously we know, but for those that don't, what was the makeup of your sort of security teams when you're going out on the ground?
Teams were really basic. I mean, we were doing military operations, protective and defensive operations, not offensive operations. We were protecting people.
But you were armed. You were armed, weren't you, for these?
We were armed, bare minimum, not overly armed, not like we would be when we were in the Marines. We would have, we'd have assets to support us, indirect fire support. We'd have maybe air support. The numbers would be bigger. We'd have troops to support. We were an 8-man team with 1 or 2 principals, 1 or 2 customers, if you like. So that made it challenging. And because you were a private contractor, the military support, should something happen, you weren't a priority. Military operations would take priority.
They lost a lot of contractors were killed in that period over those few years.
Yeah, there was a lot. And I think I was quite lucky. In the 2 years I was there, we never lost anyone on my team. And it wasn't through them not trying, I suppose, but I did know of a lot of people who succumbed.
Do you have any near misses out there?
We would probably we'd have the attacks on us used to vary from a bit of small arms fire to what we'd call a complex attack, roadside IDs, and they would happen at least once a week. So the frequency was high.
What was the stress levels like? Obviously, we did this, but
I remember the first tour I did out there was 3 months, and I came home and I thought, I ain't going back there. It's one of the reasons I left the Marines. I didn't think I was gonna make it. And then a load of money drops into your account.
Yeah,
I'll go and do one more trip. And before
the rewards were pretty good back then. I know they were still make money now, but they were the glory years, weren't they? People paying off their houses, and
they were phenomenal.
It's not seen as well as the sympathy's kind of not there as well. It's not seen such as a noble thing, is it? When you're because obviously the money you paid well, and when you join the military, you're doing it for your country or whatever. But obviously lads did pretty well out of it, and you kind of, when you leave in, you get a chance to have a reward for your military career before.
It can be like that, and you don't join the military for the money, because I think
there is no.
I was paid about £35,000 a year when I left the Marines, and I was on more than 4 times that when I went into private security, and that's from one day. That was 1 month I was on 35, the next was on this rock star wage. But it changes your motivations slightly. Your motivations in the forces was very different. Your motivations. And I could see it with people around me, but I wouldn't say I fell victim of this, but you'd see a lot of the guys just living for the moment. They weren't expecting to get a couple of years out of that before potentially being killed or having a life-changing injury. So when they would go, back home on leave,
load the lot,
they'd buy Ferraris and all sorts of things, I remember one guy hiring a Ferrari for a month, and it probably cost him about 30 grand, and you're just thinking,
What?
Because they're probably not expecting to get back.
What were the wages like in them days? What were people taking home monthly?
I think it was around about between $150,000 and $180,000 a year.
Not too bad then.
Pretty attractive when you're coming out of, you had a bit of rank when you left the Marines. I know, but those that didn't, the pay jump was dramatic anyway. But that would be something else. But what was surprising to people maybe at the time So obviously, any military were getting killed was quite publicised at the time. But there was contractors being killed almost on a daily basis at one time, and that just didn't get reported back here for whatever reason.
Exactly, and there was a lot of reason behind that as well. And we were aware of the reasons we were there, and a lot of it was political. You know, when soldiers start coming home in body bags, it's really challenging for governments to justify their position out there. But when highly paid private contractors are being injured at work, it's different. So, you know, we were under no illusion about it.
A lot of good guys lost their lives out there. People know, don't we? It's a tough time.
What were the figures of people working there back in them days?
I don't know.
Tens of thousands?
Private contractors. I think Aegis, who I was with, we had about 20,000.
Oof.
Private contractors. A lot of that was support staff as well, who would sit in the regional operations centres.
Where were you living when you were out there at the time?
On US military camps. So yeah, it was part of a Department of Defence contract to support their mission out there. So it was quite interesting.
Did the military come support you when you got in bother ever?
I remember a couple of times, but mostly no. It was dig your own way out of this hole. But one particular incident was really bad, and we couldn't actually extract ourselves. So they brought in a team to help pull us out, and with some medical cover as well. We had a couple of injuries.
Yeah, like your career in the Marines and in there, everything has a bit of a shelf life, doesn't it? You get to that point where I'm assuming you were, the money's good, but I'm sick of this risk now, or maybe you wanted something else. I don't know. What was your reason for then stepping out of that world?
I don't know. I think it was just time to move on. I think the challenge for me is gone. Something I've learned about myself over the years really is if something's challenging, I'll probably stick at it longer. Even if it, to the point I'm flogging a dead horse, I'll probably stick at it a lot longer than if something's not challenging. I tend to kind of move on. And although the environment was challenging in the sense of the dangers, the job wasn't challenging. So I kind of looked at it at that point and thought, I think I need to move somewhere else. Learned a lot of experience and got a lot of experience there. Where can I now take this? So that's what I did. I left and I went travelling.
Oh, nice. What did you do when you left?
So I went travelling around Europe, decided to explore Eastern Europe. Just stuck a backpack on and went interrailing.
Oh, awesome.
Never knew that about you. I didn't know that part. I thought you went straight to Afghan from...
No, and going to Afghan was a bit of a whim for me, really. So I got back from travelling and I actually thought, well, do you know what? I'm kind of missing the camaraderie of the forces. Should I go back in? And I went to the careers office and had a bit of a conversation with them because I'd been left 2 years. I had to go through the full
people did, didn't they?
process.
Rejoin after that. They went and did a couple of years, made some money. The ones that were sensible obviously made money, paid off stuff. But there's a lot of people that did like a couple of years in it and then end up rejoining and doing full careers after that.
I met loads, yeah. There was a lot of them, yeah. And I was nearly one of those statistics, I think. But then a very good friend of mine had just got a job in Afghanistan, working for KBR, which was a infrastructure support provider, building Camp Bastion, the military, the UK military air base out in Helmand province.
Kellogg, Brown and Rice.
Kellogg, Brown and Root, yeah, huge. Dick Cheney's old outfit. And he said, why don't you come out here, come work with us? They're looking for plumbers. So I said, okay. He said, well, you fitted your own bathroom.
Fitted your own bathroom.
And to be fair, when I left the Marines, you get some money to do some training. So I'd done like a 4-week plumbing course. It doesn't qualify you to do anything apart from fit taps and hang a sink. And I thought, do you know what? This could be interesting. And now there's always a fear in me of the fear of no, and to regret things that you've not done. So I said, okay, let's look at it. And I was still going through rejoining the Marines at the time. And they said, oh, just make up a CV, send it in, tell them you've got loads of plumbing experience. So I made up a CV and I sent it down to them. And I got a call a couple of weeks later and they said, look, do you want to come down for an interview? And I thought, I've got nothing on. I'm still waiting for the Marines getting back to me. And they flew me down to Leatherhead. Well, they flew me down to London, taxied me into Leatherhead, which is their campus, and interviewed me. They said, when can you start? I was like, okay. let's go, let's do this.
And when you went there as a plumber?
So yeah, it didn't really dawn on me, to be honest, until I landed in Kandahar and I got off the plane and I thought, people are going to expect me to know what I'm doing.
There's blagging and there's blagging.
Yeah. It was actually, I was actually flying out on a military flight, a British military flight, to get to Kandahar, and it was full of soldiers, and I knew a few of them because I was there in the blue body armor. They were like, I didn't even know you'd left. I was like, yeah, what are you going out there to do?
I'm a plumber now.
You're going to be a plumber? Are you going to be a plumber? Are you a plumber? No.
I'm going to do my apprenticeship in Afghanistan.
A well-paid plumber, I'm assuming, out there.
It was. Because it was a conflict zone. It was, but we never left the base. It was a lot safer. Wandering around in shorts.
So you actually were plumbing when you were out there? So
I got out there and quite quickly started to realise it needed a bit of organising. It was a lot of highly experienced and skilled British plumbers, electricians,
and you
generator mechanics. Yeah, but they all didn't really understand the military requirement and how to prioritise work. So I kind of saw a bit of an opportunity to kind of help reshape the plumbing department a little bit and get it operating more effectively, more efficiently. And then that transcended over about, I think it was there for about 3.5 years, where eventually me and another guy started running Camp Bastion from the ISP contract side of things. So,
were you getting your hands on the tools as well, or you just end up being like project managing it in the end?
I got my hand on the tools a few times, but we quickly took off me. We had a huge workforce out there. It was something like 1,500. The team was massive. You think Camp Bastion was the UK's third busiest airport.
In very much like a facility management role, you ended up.
Yeah, so we were building the camp and maintaining it. Mostly tier 1, which was tents. Then tier 2, we were building kind of Corrie mech type facilities.
The people don't know what's at the size and scale of that.
So the circumference of this camp was 27 miles circumference. It was an airport. It had 2 runways. It was almost like Heathrow.
Crazy.
And it was the third busiest airport in the UK. So Heathrow and Gatwick, I'm guessing, are the first 2. So behind them, we drilled into, it was in the middle of the desert. We drilled into the aquaflow and pumped water out of the ground to provide water. This water, apparently the geologists had told us, it fell in the Kush, the Hindu Kush, 20 years ago. And we were pulling it out of the ground. We had big, huge wastewater treatment plants. We had a water bottling plant where we had scientists in there who were stripping all the goodness out of the water and then re-injecting the right amount of minerals and everything back into it and bottling it, making our own bottles. It was a huge, huge facility with a huge capability. And just before I left, we were building an air traffic control tower.
Yeah,
permanent
scales. Yeah. And when that came to an end, was that again just felt like you'd done enough and wanted a new challenge?
Again, yeah, the challenge had gone. And I'd kind of engineered it that way. I had a really good team around me and they were just on it. And boredom started to creep in. And I'd heard about this problem going off in just off the Horn of Africa with modern day piracy. A friend of mine had just gone out there and started doing it. I wasn't sure if it had much legs in it, if it was going to be a sustainable career move, if you like. But as life would have it, it was. So I decided to take the plunge and go and start looking at the maritime security industry and jumped into that. Felt natural being a Royal Marine. We're supposed to be used to being on ships, but
not many are.
Believe it or not, that was the first time I'd ever been on the bridge of a ship.
Really?
Yeah. I remember
other than climbing onto one.
Yeah.
During the Bickley burglar days.
Yeah, when you're in the Marines, you never get on the bridge of the ship, do you? You're always in the belly of the ship somewhere, and then you get thrown onto a chopper and kicked out the door into a rib, and off you go. This was, I remember being stood there on the bridge looking at all these Filipinos crew. There's about 20 of them, and I'm giving them a brief and thinking, I've never been in a place like this before, and I'm giving you a brief on how we're going to secure it.
Yeah. And now they take everything you said, whatever you said was how it went. I always find that a bit crazy how we'd be changing the route
good
or
people in Filipinos, isn't it?
changing the infrastructure of the ship, of the superstructure of A-team style welding things up. It was crazy, really.
Yeah, I had a really good time. It was a little bit like a holiday because the risk was there, but the probability of it materialising was quite low. And the remuneration package was fantastic.
Holidays.
We would stop off in some of the most beautiful parts of the world, get about 3 or 4 days there and relax. But yeah, I think I lasted about maybe a couple of years max at that. And again, that boredom started creeping in. It was time to move on.
I don't think we appreciated the ride we had on that until you look back at it, actually. Of all the places you went and just left in Mauritius or Maldives, South Africa. I was left for like 8 days once. I just forgot about us. All paid, full work. And
yeah, I mean, I remember going to Madagascar about 4 times. I mean, some people go there once in a life if they're lucky.
Yeah, Madagascar was mega. I actually preferred Madagascar to like all the fancy islands like your Mauritius and Seychelles. Everyone's like, "Oh, mate, amazing you went there." I said, "Yeah, we're generally not in the posh, nice places, nice parts of it." But Madagascar, we got to explore it.
I didn't do Madagascar.
Mega place, yeah.
All the animals talking there.
Yeah, all the animals talking.
Yeah. I always made a point as well of, I always felt quite privileged to get to do that as well. And I always tried to make the most out of the time. I know, everybody's to their own, but some people just get on the lash for like 3 or 4 days. And it's not to say I didn't, because I would as well. But if we got 5 days off, I remember dragging a couple of lads away and saying, "Come on, let's go and do a paddy dive course in Oman." We got to, in Egypt, let's go and see the pyramids. Let's hire a horse, go around the pyramids or something like that. So it was always kind of, let's go and do something. Let's utilise this time we're here. Let's go and travel.
No, I didn't do the pyramids. I didn't do that much time in Egypt, but did a lot in South Africa. And the same thing. I think the first time we just went on a piss. And then the second time, like, lads, we'd go and watch one of the Super Rugby games, and we'd go to Lion Park. So I made sure and like drag everyone else with me. And I'm like, I'm so glad we did that. Like I said, you start appreciating that you're in these amazing places with time off that you probably never get that opportunity again. You just started making the most of it. But yeah, I didn't necessarily enjoy the jog. Found the boredom kicked in quite quickly, but the freedom and time off was something else.
Wish I had more fit, but put photos from that time. I didn't really get many pictures.
I never took pictures.
Well, being on the vessels was quite boring, I found. And you were in a, you'd harden the vessel, you'd prepare the crew, and then you'd sail through the high-risk area, and you'd do some sort of watch routine in case something happened. Nothing happened, vast majority of the time. And then you'd get somewhere and you go, right, let's now do something exciting. Because it wasn't exciting.
Some ships were better than others. Some nationalities were, like German ships were pretty good. Very good. The food was amazing.
Did you bring it back to Germany again?
Yeah, but Germany again.
Motherland every time, mate. Either rugby or Germany comes up in every town.
Like Chinese and Indian ships, how sort of strict they were run. They were Chinese ships were pretty strict. Indian ships had a few challenges around the food.
That was the end for me. I had a Christmas day on there once, and we just had a plate of rice. They had no protein, so they literally caught some fish, and by the time it gone round everyone else, you just got a fish head and a bit of rice, and I was just throwing in peanut butter because that was the only way to get some protein, and I was like, this isn't for me now.
Yeah.
I'm done.
I remember being on one ship, and it was one of the guys, I think he lived on cereal, cornflakes for like 10 days, and I'm a pretty adventurous eater. I'll eat offal, I'll eat most things, or I have done at least when I was certainly younger. I choose not to now because I don't have to. But I remember going down one day and there was just chicken feet. I was like, where's the rest of the chicken?
Chicken feet.
And I had this, I don't know why, but I had this kind of image in my head of the chef cutting the feet off the chickens and throwing the full chicken over the side of the vessel and just, I think it might have been a Filipino vessel, but I was just, where is it? Let's get a bit of breast and a bit of leg here. Yeah.
It was all right, though, chicken feet, and they taste all right.
No, I didn't partake, to be honest.
You didn't partake? Yeah.
My first one was a super yacht. The food was unbelievable. Like, some lads had like cattle ships and stuff. Like,
yeah, some wonking jobs.
Container ships are interesting. Like 10,000 containers on a ship. Like, I was like, so Yeah, it was all interesting. I kind of found out how different ships work.
We understand how the world operates, didn't you? By doing that job, whether you realised it or not, actually nearly all the trade comes from the sea, and that's how important it was. And
over 50,000 vessels,
mental
transiting around, and
hard life for crew. I always remember like the sort of Filipino or Indian crew, and they'd be on like away for 9 months, paid in cash at the end, $30-40 a day, and they're working. It's almost like slave labor. I know it might be a different standard of living in them country, but you'd
see the comparison between some of the German vessels, for example, where most of the crew were German nationality, highly paid, highly skilled, trained, looked after really well, fantastic food, fantastic living quarters, and then you'd go on another vessel which was it was either Chinese run and operated, or it was from the Philippines. It was terrible.
Aircon,
the conditions,
work.
Yeah. We would be sleeping on the bridge wings because there wasn't any accommodation for us.
Any noteworthy attacks or anything, or any in your time in our world? Nothing.
No,
really.
No. We had a couple of approaches. But yeah, and I think having armed security on board a vessel back in those days was the sure way to kind of navigate safely through those areas. The pirates weren't up for a fight. They were really just looking to take the vessel. Their business model was take the vessel, hold it for ransom, get the money, and hand the vessel back. Everybody's safe. They were looking for the easiest targets. And if you've got armed security on board, you're not the easiest target. There was plenty of vessels out there without armed security on board.
Yeah, and they wouldn't train soldiers either that whatever motivation, whether they were fishermen or they were forced into it. They wouldn't really looking for gunfights. Yeah.
Some of the tactics they were using towards the end, there was definitely an argument to be said that had some sort of Western military training. But
yeah, there's a few dits going around about that when the guys training them up, but yeah, we won't get into that one.
Oh yeah. Sorry, yeah, I remember what you're saying now. So what was why did you leave the gold rush of Maritime?
I didn't really leave it. So me and a couple of other colleagues, a couple of old friends, decided to set up our own business. And what we seen was I think there was enough people doing the operations. And we thought there's our maritime security operations, but there wasn't enough people doing the training and getting people prepared for it and doing the high level, strategic level risk assessments for it and supporting a lot of the big maritime security providers. So we decided to set up a company and try and kind of fill that gap or those gaps that we'd identified. So we still stayed in the industry as such, but we stopped working as operators out at sea. That lasted for a couple of years, probably about 3 years.
Was that an ambition of yours to go into business, or?
It wasn't. I remember kind of being talked into it a little bit. Well, it didn't take much talking me into it, to be honest. Like I say, normally if somebody puts an opportunity down, I
give it a go.
I'll take it, yeah. And so, yeah, it's not something I thought about. It's not something I thought I'd have the acumen for. And I probably didn't have the acumen for, to be fair. What I did realise was I struggled in business, doing business, when my passion was operations, security. And what I found after a couple of years was I was learning the business. I was learning the different functions of it and how to register it, get it up and running, getting out there, marketing yourself. But while you're doing all this, you're not maintaining or developing your security knowledge and skills. So I kind of missed that a little bit. Plus, me and the two people I'd set it up with as well, we weren't really 100% aligned on what we thought the business direction should be. And I kind of thought, well, they were more aligned than I was with them. And I thought, right, it's probably a good time for me to move on. And
you're also taking a punt on yourselves, and when you've gone from a job where you're getting paid a fair bit to suddenly going it alone, and it's on you now to make that business work and earn a living, and that's a risk that not everyone's willing to take.
That's a huge part of it. I mean, when you first set up a business, it sounds great, and you give yourself a business card and you've got your own personal email account, you know, and these little things, you know, they mean something, but then you start living hand to mouth. And, you know, where's the next bit of cash coming in
Last
from?
one to be paid once you paid all the guys working for you.
And your workload's going up and your bank balance is going down. And you're like, So yeah, that was hard to manage. I think I managed it really well. You know, I know one of the other guys, he struggled with it. You know, I had a bit of family support, so I was kind of fine. Him less so. So he's, you know, he was pretty much on his own. So yeah, I think it affected us all in different ways. But for me, it was really, I was spending a lot of time with my head in the computer, my head in the books, trying to drum up business, networking with people, trying to kind of get ourselves out there. And my passion was not in that area. You know, it's not an area I particularly felt comfortable with, and it wasn't an area I particularly wanted to be in, to be fair. So I thought, well, how can I move this on? And so what did I do? I ended up setting up another business with another friend.
While this is still going on?
No, we moved on. And another friend, Jay Hicks, he approached me and said, you know, do you want to help set up this company? I've got some ideas. And we set up Athena Risk. And I was like, yeah, let's go for it. Yeah. And I'd worked with Jay marginally and previously before that. He was former UKSF and really, really good guy. A very high impact level of work. You know, he really, really good operator in that sense. And I thought, yeah, come on, let's do it. You know, I've got nothing to lose. And everything's a gain. So we did that. Brought in another friend, Aaron, who was ex-Delta. He came in, really good businessman. He brought in a lot of our investments to get that business going as well. And off we went, you know, and we just tried to make the most of it as well. It was just unfortunate with that company, somebody who the main investor who invested in us had a lot of other businesses that they were needing to prioritize. And he basically said, look, I can't get you to where you need to be. I need to pull out. I need to focus. This was probably about a year in. I need to focus in this area. I'm cutting away, you know, some of my current commitments. You were the last in, and you're probably the low-hanging fruit for me, so I'm going to cut that off. And I panicked. I was like, they're going to want all their money back. And he just said, don't worry about it.
You were gaining quite a bit of traction, weren't you, at the time? I remember you know, some of the clients you were working with, you probably can't name them, but you were working with some pretty big brands. Yeah,
we were delivering some travel risk awareness workshops for some big airlines, and that was through somebody in the Northeast who kind of put us in touch there and just said, really like you guys, what you do, and she took a punt on us, massive punt, and it really kind of paid off a little bit.
Even though you had that investment, it was you guys growing and growing that business, like doing your own business development and getting out there.
Yeah, there was no one doing it for us, you know, and again, it wasn't a place I felt really comfortable in, and you know, and I'm speaking on behalf of Jay, it probably wasn't a place that he was really comfortable in as well. But like any challenge, you just look at it and go, well, okay, how can we make this work? What are the areas we need to work on? How do we move it forward? But once the investment went, we weren't in a position to be bringing in enough revenue to keep that business going. So eventually...
Still exists today, that business though, in some form?
I handed it over to another friend who was wanting to do something similar. It was already made, as Boris Johnson would say, it was oven ready. And we said, if you've got the commitment, you know, just take it. We didn't want anything in return. It was there. There was no debt. There was nothing in it. It was just, there you go. The websites were set up. All the connections were made. Everything was there, ready to go, really, if you had the capability to drive it. And I don't know. I don't know if it's still there.
So what was next?
I started looking at education, wanted to get some education after that. I thought really need to progress in the security career. A very good friend of mine said, come work with me down in London on the circuit, doing some close protection. Very easy, give you an opportunity to finish your masters. So I took him up on that. And it was about a year of work there. sitting in wealthy people's houses while they were away on holiday, just with my heads in the books. It was really helpful.
The Pet Wolf days, wasn't it? I remember.
Yeah.
The Wolf, yeah.
Yeah,
I
the
don't know
Wolf.
what say it is, but yeah, it's just quite an interesting.
Yeah, it's an off the line conversation.
Yeah.
And then eventually, same friend who we've been friends since I was 17. He said, "Look, I'm supporting a client who owns a hedge fund. Would you be interested in helping them across Europe and Asia in that area? Go and have a conversation with them." So I said, "Yeah, okay," and went and had lunch with John, who subsequently became my boss, who was the global security director for the hedge fund. And we sat down, had lunch, and he said, "Look, come on board. It's we're gonna be doing some amazing stuff." He'd been given his mission statement, which is we want to be the most successful hedge fund in the world in the next 3 years. And I thought, well, okay, sounds exciting. Never worked in finance, but sounds exciting. Let's do this.
Steep learning curve?
No, very slow to start with. Because it was a new role, being responsible for Europe and Asia, nobody had run that role, so I had to carve it up and make it my own. So it started quite slow.
What sort of things were you doing? Obviously, how involved were you in the financial side of it? Was that something you were analysing or?
No, if you'd seen my bank balance, you'd
Yeah.
know I'm not a financial guy. So what a hedge fund is, it's traders. They trade in different markets, either in asset management or securities, and it was supporting their operations. And one of the unique selling points, if you like, or that made them really good was when they identified a market in a particular country, they could get in there and set up a business and start trading very quickly. And how we supported that in security was to make sure that whatever they were doing there was protected. So if they wanted to set up in Paris, for example, they'd want to set up and be operational within 8 weeks. So how do we do that? And we had to develop a strategy to design offices from a security point of view. There'd be principal designers and architects. They would be designing the office space for them. We would have to make sure that the security strategy and the security design was right for those areas. And essentially that's security operations across there. Close protection operations, looking after some of the key people within the business, and special events as well, globally. So it was a really interesting job. Probably one of the not strangest companies I worked for, but ever likely to work for again. It was just get things done. Doesn't matter how much it costs, get it done.
It's a nice position to be in when you've got budgets like that.
Really, a
behind
little
you.
bit strange for me to start with. There was no real financial approvals process. It was just.
I assume you had to get an understanding of how the hedge funds work, though, to be able to support them. Without going too detailed into, you weren't going to be a trader, but you had to have a bit of an understanding or learn that part like you do in any business, I'm sure.
Well, so the traders were really our customers. We were supporting their operation, and I found it fascinating working with these. I mean, this company had hired the smartest people globally. The smartest men and women from around the world. If you took the London office, for example, it was it had people from China, Hong Kong, all there as interns, learning, trading, as well as Brits and from all over the world. So when you were helping support them, you couldn't, these people are really smart. You couldn't blag your way through this kind of stuff. And I remember delivering some risk assessments on, we're talking about probability. And, this is these guys and girls' whole life is working out what is the probability of an event materializing. And me with my little simplistic matrix just doesn't cut it. They want to talk about probability theory and how have I actually got to that level of likelihood of an event occurring. So it was a real kind of steep learning curve in that sense to kind of, align myself a little bit more to produce work that they would understand a little bit better.
Did going down the MBA route in your education, that give you a bit more credibility to have those conversations?
The MBA was really good for me because I wanted to understand the pains and groans of business. Because I think too often in security, we deliver security in silo. When we're actually, security feathers its nest through all parts of the business. So if you don't understand those parts of the business, then how do you know what you're delivering to them?
Yeah, it becomes less effective as well, isn't it?
Exactly, and potentially more not as cost effective either.
The one thing with, obviously I know you've done your MBA, I know you're a big reader, you've obviously, I know we speak a lot, but you're always 2 steps. You are like the modern day risk professional, like where you almost prioritize your knowledge of business, not just understand the organization you work for, but as a whole, almost, not over your security knowledge, but what sort of sets you apart of, I know you've done things along, I know you've been in business yourself and everything else, but you truly sort of understand it all, really. Maybe not everyone does. Not just saying that, it'd be nice because you're on a podcast. That's the only one you get.
Good chuck up there.
I'm going to take that.
And ironically, surprisingly, which obviously won't say the name of the company you went to work for is the safe place in a ship you go if you get attacked by pirates.
Yeah, it
You
was.
just named this company then.
Not everyone know what that's called.
Yeah. And I ended up having John, who was my boss. He was ex Secret Service, was the head of security for, during his time, President Bush, and then he brought in another person to help him out who had just basically left as the head of security for Joe Biden. So those were the kind of 2 guys I was working for, and highly professional, very, very high standards. And it was great. It was really good to work for. I think they found it a little bit strange having this Brit, not just a Brit, this Geordie who has got his own way of doing things as well. But it was an interesting time, certainly for me. Learned a lot there. A lot about the city of London, and a lot about the financial industry, and a lot about corporate politics.
So how did it finish off at that company, Dave?
Well, I finished really well. I think I did close to 3 years there, and an opportunity came up. I was approached by the talent acquisition team at Virtus Data Centers, which is where I currently am. And
how do they find you then, mate? People talk about it all the time, being headhunted, and I'm assuming from what the likes of LinkedIn.
Does any
he's out there looking for you?
Well, no, I wasn't headhunted. I think headhunted when somebody says, "I want that person there. Go and get them."
That sounds better. My next time
it does.
Maybe say that. We'll retake it. Reshoot.
So their talent acquisition team reached out to me, and I had with the person there, I had some really good interviews with talking about the role, and it sounded really interesting. I didn't know a lot about data centers at the time. I think there's 3 types of people when it comes to data centers. There's those who know what a data center is and what it's there to do and how it's done. There's people like me at the time who think they know what a data center is, but really there's a lot you don't know, and there's those who have never even heard of them. So
we're probably in that second group,
not even sure which one I am.
We're in between the second and last group.
What actually, before you go into what is it actually?
Data centers play a critical role in the in your technology infrastructure. It's a big data storage place. Big data halls full of racks are where information and data is stored. You've probably seen server rooms and things like that in buildings.
Like a giant one of them.
Huge ones of them.
How big are we talking?
You've probably heard of the cloud, cloud storage. Interestingly, if I speak to family members and they talk about...
You just say that beside me. Not actually in the air.
Well, I remember talking to family members and I think if you can explain to, the older generation in your family potentially, and get them to understand it, then you've done well. And I remember trying to explain, cloud storage, and you can see their eyes will disappear to the cloud. And
they threw you off with the name of that, didn't they?
Exactly. But it's just
floating around.
It's
ones and zeros.
It's referring to a remote storage capability. So, as I've explained to my wife, when you're on Amazon Prime and you're pulling a video, or I've explained to my mum, if you're on Netflix and you click play on a video, that video is sat in a data center somewhere, and it's getting a signal from your device to say, right, let's put this on and let's play that, and it streams it through to your device. So the data stored there, it's just streaming it through to your device.
What are we talking about scale-wise, mate? Like size of data centers, or not, without giving it all, any specific ones away? What sort of?
They're huge.
Vast?
I mean, if we talk about the industry, in the UK, I think, depending on where you look for your information, it varies, but it's an ever-changing landscape as well. So somewhere between 200 and 250 data centers within the UK.
Yeah, but the actual centers, can they be like football pitch size? Some of them as big as that.
Yeah, you can have them much smaller than that. But what's tending to happen now is because of AI, there's a huge demand to store data, and it's pushing the industry into what we call campus level. So 4 football pitches potentially, and it really depends on what land's available, where it's available, what power's there, what fiber connections are there to support them.
And this is how little I understand it, right? When you described, like, you explained to your mother of watching something on Amazon or Netflix, I was like sort of picturing somebody in the big racks of the data with like a VHS tape of like, now we're going to put Friends on, and everyone at home is going to watch.
Exactly.
This is why you don't teach a cyber data.
Exactly. And when I see the cogs turning, and people, when I'm explaining that, it's kind of what they're thinking, that poor little guy who's in there, he's got to run over to that shelf, pull it out and put, and okay, it's a very analog way of thinking about it, but essentially that's what it is. It's everything's there, and as you pull it, or as you need it over the internet, you'll pull it from there and you'll store it there as well. We store very little, although we still do on our PCs and on our laptops and on our devices, because obviously it would just get, your storage capacity would just get eaten up. So that's kind of what it is.
Because even the internet cables go under the sea and everything, don't they? Kind of.
Yeah. So, internationally we have the network systems coming in, and they come into particular areas in the UK, and then they spread out to all these data centers, and then these data centers then provide part of that network to your mobile phone. Might
be wrong here as well, which happens now and again. Don't Amazon own the majority of these data centers?
No. So there's various different data centers. You've got your, what I would call your tech giants, what are otherwise known as hyperscalers in the industry. They will design, build, and operate their own data centers. So the likes of AWS, they will do that. But they will also, which is similar to Vertis, we are what we call a colo provider. So we design and build and operate data centers for anybody who wants to come in, purchase that service within our facilities and store their data within our facilities.
Securing these sites is pretty important, I can imagine, when you're looking after that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the most important thing there, but I'm sure the rest of Vertis would probably argue with that as well. Everybody thinks their part of ship's the most important part, don't they? But certainly security of these facilities is our customers. It's paramount. Availability, I would say. So they want to know that they can access their data and it's in a reliable way, readily available whenever they need it. That's important to them. But also its security is important to them as well. So that's what I play a part in, is how do we protect it, but also make sure it's available.
It's hard to get your head around the vast scale of it, isn't it? Just of all this data sort of thing. And how it even works.
It's a fascinating industry. I mean, every day is a learning day for me. And just to build into the scale of it, I think, and again, the figures are different wherever you look because it's such a rapidly growing. And I think most people are just now starting to hear this word data center around. And I've talked to people in security and they don't really, similar to yourselves, they don't know what a data center is. Or they think they might know what it is. But because of the growth of AI, the demand on the data center industry's got huge. And we're expecting to double in the next 7 years. So by 2032, it'll have doubled. If you take the 200 to 250 in the UK, we're going to potentially, maybe not in the UK, double that. We're talking global figures here, but that's what's going to happen. That's what they're expecting.
If you want to slot a data centre in downstairs, mate, you'd have to get rid of the jiu-jitsu bit, but if there's money to be made, there's conversation there.
Well, was you telling about the I can't remember, maybe somebody else the other day, but the energy requirements of AI to power AI is like 10 times or 100 times more. I think there's something on the podcast the other day off camera. Sorry.
It is. It's yeah. I don't know the figures, but as you increase your operation, yes, energy is going to be needed more. We're quite lucky at Virtus. We use 100% renewable energy, which is one of our unique selling points. We're quite proud of that credential. No matter what part of business you're in, you're going to have some sort of impact on the environment. So we're very, very mindful of that and how we deliver our service. To the point where we have other initiatives in other countries where we're setting up.
I was going to say you're operating outside of the UK as well.
We're not operating yet because as a business we design, build and operate. We're in the process of designing and building in Berlin. It's public knowledge. But we're taking a different track out in some of these areas as well where data centers produce a lot of heat. So we're kind of taking that heat. How do we transfer that heat into heating homes and in other industries? So again, it's what everyone, certainly not me personally, but the rest, other parts of Virtus are looking at areas where we can maintain really good environmental credentials as well as making sure that the apps on our phones work when we need them to.
So this is something the company's doing?
I think a lot of data center companies are doing this, and the ones that'll do well, I feel, and this is a personal opinion, I think the ones that will do well over the coming years would be the ones who grow ethically, who grow with that environmental piece in mind, rather than you can, and I've seen it certainly going back to Iraq and maritime security, when you've got industries which are rapidly growing, you will have those who grow ethically, not necessarily the fastest, and you'll have those who will just grow quickly at all costs. And I think Virtus, we are certainly on the good side of that growth.
You probably obviously used to teach on the course and for a good few years before you departed, left before you were pushed. But obviously you taught in the course a lot of the models we still use, and you're referencing in different ways throughout the course. And there's 2,000 people who've gone through that program now, just about hit 2,000. Whenever we are running, the different consultancy tasks which we do, and generally you'd probably be in the top 5 people we would pick for your approach to things. And maybe perhaps, for people looking, you're going into the sort of space that you've gone into of how you do things a little bit differently. Perhaps it's kind of a good little tip for students of how you approach risk management, maybe a little bit different. I know you're all about the business side and the opportunity, but maybe sort of to finish off on
Dave's top tips.
How do you become the new Dave? And also I know you speak a few languages now as well, but continually evolving.
Well, I mean, the person sat before you is not without many scars, so try not to become the new Dave, really.
You're still on the boating shoes here.
Still wearing deck shoes. I'm still waiting for that dream job of
I wonder if it's the same. Is it the same pair of shoes from 20 years ago, or does he just one?
Like Steve Jobs, he has a wardrobe just full of the same stuff, ready to grab.
Same brand.
Sorry, mate, for any of it.
Yeah. I think we went through my career earlier on, and I think risk management started. Well, it starts from the day you're born, isn't it? We're all dynamically risk assessing, I suppose. And when I was in Iraq doing the private security work, I think it was there that I started to understand the difference between dynamic risk assessment and strategic risk assessment. And I think it was because I was making a lot of mistakes. I was trying to explain to a lot of US military officials who we were trying to look after, explain to them the risks that they could be involved in, but in a dynamic way. And it didn't make sense to them. So I've certainly kind of grown that way. It's I think, but for me, looking at risk, I've stopped reading risk books per se. I've stopped really kind of looking at risk in a stylistic way, and I've started to look at what I would call fringe topics, which impact risk a lot more, which we probably don't think of. And the area I'm really fascinated in at the minute is the psychology of risk. And so you'll probably see me more with a book about psychology than you will about risk and security. I'll say to a lot of people, security is people protecting people from people. And if you don't understand people, you're at a disadvantage in security. So you need to understand people. And what is people?
I might use that line going forward. Sounds really good.
We're all different. Your interpretation of a risk event and how that could impact you is very different to what I might think is a risk, or the level of impact on that. So I think we need to look at things in that fashion. Our brain as well. I kind of look at how our brain makes decisions as well. So there's a psychology around people, but then there's also how we make decisions and how we identify problems. And these are certainly not my kind of eureka moments, but you've got intuitive thinking. Intuitive thinking is a big, the brain's an amazing organ, piece of kit, whatever you want to call it. But it's also got some vulnerabilities in it, which can help in a certain situation, but can cause more problems than they're solving in another part. And intuitive thinking is one of those areas really, which really interests me. It's about how do we look at a situation and interpret that. You're probably thinking, what is intuitive thinking? I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. So,
cool, man.
That's not part of the script.
Right.
Yeah,
you've probably heard of this test, and it's a little test, but it'll highlight the point I'm trying to make. I think if a bat and ball costs £1.10,
it's not much question, is it?
And the bat is £1 more than the ball. How much is the ball?
It's a trick question, is it?
No.
Say that again.
If a bat and ball costs £1.10, the bat is £1 on its own. Sorry, the bat is £1 more than the ball. How much is the ball?
10p.
10p. Yeah. So most people would. I think it's something.
I'm normally bad at maths, mate. I've got that.
Well,
I was thinking
This is the Rain Man. This is the maths guy.
I think there was some trick with that question. Then.
Well, you did. You got it wrong. So, because you're thinking with the intuitive part of your brain substitutes a lot. It's taking a lot of information all the time.
So it was wrong,
so it substitutes information, and it goes for the easiest answer. The answer is 5. Because the bat is £1 more than the ball. So I'll let you think about that later on. But anyway.
The answer's 5.
The answer's 5.
Come on, mate. You're Rain Man to get this.
So if you sit down with a pen and a bit of paper, you'll work it out quite easy. But you don't want to take up all this podcast trying to work it out. And that's what our brain does. It really kind of substitutes information.
Can't leave it on a cliffhanger, mate, because people will be going, what was the answer?
No, let people work it out.
And
be one of them ones that people can never work out.
No, it's very simple.
We'll leave it as a cliffhanger.
It's very simple if you think about it, but we don't. We go with the easiest answer all the time. It's what our brain wants. It wants to find the easiest, obvious answer. So it substitutes information. And when you're doing strategic level risk assessment, we can, and I see it a lot, we tend to make strategic level risk assessment decisions in a dynamic risk assessment kind of mentality, and we're looking at the initial environment and taking the initial responses, and we're applying that in a strategic way, and that can cause problems. So,
still thinking about the ball,
I'm going to work it out with you later.
Yeah,
this is why you're top of your game.
Yeah. So
no, awesome.
So those are kind of two key areas. Know people, understand the psychology of people, and understand how you interpret different information. Everyone's got bias, everyone's got anchors, everyone's got these forces that are applied to you in the way you think about things. So it means a lot of looking inwards if you're going to make decisions.
You're saying you're doing a fair bit of reading, mate. What's any recommends for when you're talking about looking at psychology for helping in this world?
No, I'm reading the psychology of money at the minute.
I think I've got a book.
Yeah, and
white book.
Yeah, she I can't remember the name of the author, but it's a really well-written book, and I can relate a lot to what she's saying in there. And it's the reason I'm reading it is I thought I was quite good with money, and I've just started to get into dabbling in crypto, and I thought I better just kind of do some wider reading around this. And yeah,
it's partly a part of it to do with the psychology of how your parents bring you up. And then how you approach business, of how you spend.
Yeah.
It's in your subconscious. If you're a bit more loose with spending, a bit more.
Our parents weren't loose with spending, though, were they? Your mum was probably a bit more.
My mother was, but
Yeah, my mum and dad definitely weren't, but I'm loose. That's why I've got no cash.
Yeah, so I mean, my parents, you know, they didn't have a lot of money, and when they did, they would spend it, and you know, to try and make, you know, keep everybody happy and try and bring joy, I suppose, into our life. But it's amazing when you look at how you know your relationship with those within your history, how it can impact you going forward, and how it can impact your decisions you make.
So what's obviously, yeah, I know you're bettering yourself at the moment, fluent in a few languages now. What's the next step for Dave? You know, president of data center, or where do you want to? What's the next thing? Where are you going?
I don't know. I'm not somebody who likes to plan too far ahead. You know, I know moment. People have 5-year plans and 10-year plans, and you know, and I think sometimes it's great to have your vessel pointed in the right direction. You know, but you know, there's still a big ocean out there. There's still a lot of sub-directions you can go.
And what's the next mountain? Because you climbed a pretty big mountain a few years ago randomly on your own.
Mont Blanc, yeah.
Mont Blanc.
Yeah.
Good pens.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. Yeah.
You were talking about doing another one, weren't you? Another climb.
So I think it's a bit of a pipe dream at the minute. I'd like to climb Mount Elbrus, which is a little bit higher than Mont Blanc. Similar kind of grade and style. I think if I go up the north side, it's a little bit more challenging, a bit more remote. But I'd like to do that. Sorry?
On your own?
I'd like to, yeah. I think if you climb with somebody else, there's an excuse right next to you to turn back when it gets a bit challenging. Whilst when you're on your own, you'll push yourself. Well, certainly I find I push myself harder on my own.
The big burglar likes to work solo, doesn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. But, yeah, I think it'll just be a dream, to be honest. Getting a bit old.
It's not over yet, mate.
No. But I know we're doing there's a few of us in Virtus. We're doing the 3 Peaks Challenge soon. So looking forward to that. End of June. So
we'll wait for the donation link, mate. We'll support you up there.
That'll be really well received.
24 hours, is it?
It's 24 hours to climb all 3 peaks, yeah. And I've never climbed Snowdon, believe it or not. So
that's the only one I've done out of them 3.
Yeah, so done Ben Nevis and Scarfell Pike, but never Snowdon.
You done Ben Nevis?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's good.
I've got a couple of members of the team who've actually done the challenge in the past, so we've got some experience there, and we've got some people who haven't got as much experience, so we've got a bit of a mixed team. So it's going to be a good 24 hours.
Rakesh up there, eh? Is he doing it?
Sorry?
Rakesh doing it?
No, Rakesh.
Get him on there, mate.
No, he's not.
He's a good boy.
You're not done Mam Toll, though, have you?
It's our local one.
Yeah, actually,
It'll take you half an hour, but
yeah, you're at the top pretty much straight away.
Yeah,
and it's downhill quite far.
I can't peak now. We're too broken.
Kinder Scout is pretty good actually around here.
Yeah. No,
it's not.
I don't get out of the house that much.
It's not Mont Blanc, mate, but
busy family time. Well, mate, we'll bring us to a close. Thanks for your time, mate. It's been insightful. A few things we didn't know, which is always we keep finding this out with people that we know pretty well. That something will come out that that we didn't know about.
Yeah, loads of things. Kind of
good, mate. And
hopefully we'll go on holiday on our next honeymoon. One of our next honeymoons, we'll go out together and have another holiday together.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been interesting.
Cheers, Dave.
It's been like therapy.
Therapy.
Cheers, Dave. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you.
Awesome.